In a society striving for equality, stories that expose the residual and destructive power of prejudice are vital reminders of the work yet to be done. This is the story of a strong, accomplished black woman whose quiet dignity and high rank as a police chief clash with the small-mindedness of a patrol officer poisoned by prejudice. What starts as a seemingly routine traffic stop becomes a glaring display of abuse of power and systemic bias. But justice, though often delayed, is served in the most poetic way possible when truth and integrity prevail. The afternoon sun blazed down on the city streets, painting the sidewalks with long shadows. Jasmine Carter, a poised and accomplished black woman in her mid-40s, adjusted her rearview mirror as she navigated the familiar route back to the precinct. A lifelong officer and now the city's police chief, she had seen the best and worst of humanity. Today, dressed in plain clothes for an undercover project she was supervising, she blended seamlessly with the civilians around her. Her sleek black sedan, devoid of official markings, hummed softly beneath her as she glanced at the time on her dashboard. Lunch hour was over, and she had a busy afternoon ahead. As she signaled to change lanes, the blare of a police siren shattered her thoughts. She glanced in the rearview mirror and saw a patrol car tailing her, its lights flashing insistently. Confused but unperturbed, Jasmine pulled over to the side of the road. She watched the officer step out of the vehicle, his posture bristling with authority. He was a tall, stocky man with a stern face and an air of habitual superiority. "License and registration?" he demanded curtly as he approached her window. Jasmine calmly retrieved the documents from her glove compartment, her years of experience teaching her to remain composed in such situations. She handed them over with a polite nod. "Was there a problem, officer?" she asked, her voice steady but curious. He ignored her question, scrutinizing her papers longer than necessary. "Where are you coming from?" he finally asked. "From lunch," Jasmine replied simply. "Why was I stopped?" The officer didn't answer, instead continuing to ask vague questions about her destination and purpose. Jasmine's initial assumption that this was a routine stop began to feel less plausible. Still, she remained patient, though her time was ticking away. "Officer, with all due respect, I've answered your questions and provided my documents. Am I free to go?" Her directness seemed to irk him. His jaw tightened, and he leaned closer to her window. "You'll go when I say you can go," he snapped, grabbing her arm through the open window. Jasmine's eyes narrowed, but she maintained her composure. "What do you want, officer? This behavior is unprofessional. I have a job to get back to." His response was as shocking as it was vile. Without warning, he spit directly at her face, the offensive act landing on her nose and cheek. Time seemed to freeze. Jasmine's instinctual reaction was to recoil in disgust, but she quickly regained control. Wiping her face with a tissue from her purse, she said nothing. Her dignity remained intact, even as her heart raced with anger and disbelief. "You're free to go," he said, a sneer curling his lips. Jasmine met his gaze for a brief moment before driving away, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. She didn't need to say anything. She had already decided on her next steps. Back at the precinct, Jasmine reported the incident to Internal Affairs, detailing every moment with precision. Her rank didn't shield her from prejudice, but it did provide her with the tools and connections to seek justice. An investigation was launched, and a court date was set. The officer, identified as Brian Watts, showed no remorse during the preliminary inquiries. His confidence in his untouchability was evident. But that confidence began to waver when he walked into the courtroom and saw Jasmine seated at the plaintiff's table, dressed in her full police chief uniform. The realization hit him like a freight train. The courtroom was silent as the proceedings began, the air heavy with anticipation. Presiding over the case was Judge Marcus Reddington, a man whose reputation for fairness and unwavering adherence to justice preceded him. He was in his mid-60s, with silver hair neatly combed back and sharp, perceptive blue eyes that seemed to peer directly into the soul of anyone before him. His deep voice carried authority, but it was tempered by a demeanor of measured patience. Judge Reddington wore the traditional black robe, immaculately pressed, and his reading glasses rested on the tip of his nose as he reviewed the documents before him. His every movement was deliberate, projecting both command and respect for the gravity of the case at hand. The defendant, Officer Brian Watts, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his earlier bravado clearly eroding under the weight of the judge's presence. As the courtroom settled, Judge Reddington leaned forward slightly, clasping his hands on the bench. "Officer Watts," he began, his tone even but firm, "you stand accused of misconduct and abuse of power while on duty. Before this court, you are expected to explain your actions with complete honesty and accountability. Do you understand the gravity of these charges?" Watts nodded, his face pale. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Good. Then let us proceed. I will start by asking for clarity on your intent during the stop. Why did you pull over the plaintiff's vehicle?" Watts hesitated, fumbling for words. I believed there was suspicious behavior." The judge's gaze hardened. "Suspicious behavior?" "According to the records, Chief Carter had done nothing to warrant your attention. Are you suggesting her presence alone constituted suspicion?" Watts stammered. "No, Your Honor." "Then why did you escalate the situation by detaining her unnecessarily and ultimately resorting to actions unbecoming of an officer of the law?" Answer carefully, Officer Watts. This court does not tolerate evasions. The silence in the courtroom was deafening as Watts struggled to respond. Finally, he muttered, "I don't have an excuse, Your Honor." Judge Reddington sighed, removing his glasses and pinching the bridge of his nose. Not having an excuse is not the same as taking responsibility. You failed in your duty to uphold the law impartially and without prejudice. Your actions not only humiliated a fellow officer but also damaged the trust this community places in law enforcement. Turning to Jasmine Carter, the judge softened his tone. "Chief Carter, your testimony has been clear and compelling. Is there anything further you wish to add regarding the impact of this incident?" Jasmine stood, her police uniform immaculate, her voice calm yet resolute. "Your Honor, incidents like this erode public trust in the very institution meant to protect them. As officers, we are called to a higher standard. This isn't just about what happened to me. It's about ensuring no one else has to experience such indignity." The judge nodded, visibly moved by her words. Addressing the court, he delivered his verdict. "Officer Watts, your conduct was a gross violation of the principles you swore to uphold. As such, you are hereby found guilty of misconduct and abuse of power. You will be dismissed from your position, effective immediately. Furthermore, your eligibility for reinstatement in any law enforcement capacity is permanently revoked." A murmur rippled through the courtroom, but Judge Reddington's gavel brought silence. His voice remained steady as he concluded, "Let this serve as a reminder. No one is above accountability, especially those tasked with enforcing the law." As Watts was escorted out, the weight of his actions and their consequences was palpable. Jasmine Carter's quiet dignity throughout the proceedings stood in stark contrast to his downfall, a testament to her unwavering commitment to justice. Word of the incident spread quickly throughout the precinct and beyond. For many officers, it was a sobering moment. Brian Watts' dismissal was not just a punishment for his actions but a signal that such behavior would no longer be tolerated. Jasmine's quiet resilience and her unwavering commitment to justice inspired her colleagues to reflect on their own conduct. Lieutenant Miguel Santos, a veteran officer with a reputation for fairness, took it upon himself to spearhead new training programs within the department. "We have to do better," he told his peers during a meeting. "Not just because we fear consequences, but because it's the right thing to do." Chief Carter has shown us that integrity matters. The precinct began implementing mandatory bias training, workshops on cultural sensitivity, and community outreach programs. Officers were encouraged to engage with the neighborhoods they patrolled, fostering trust and understanding. Jasmine's leadership turned what could have been a moment of shame into an opportunity for growth and change. Other precincts in the city took notice. The reforms introduced by Jasmine and her team became a model for others, earning the department recognition for its efforts to combat systemic bias. Officers who once viewed their positions solely as enforcers of the law began to see themselves as protectors and allies of the community. For Jasmine, the transformation of her precinct was a testament to the power of accountability and perseverance. She knew the road ahead was long and fraught with challenges, but she also knew that change was possible, one step at a time. Her story became a beacon of hope, proving that even in the face of prejudice and injustice, integrity and leadership could prevail. Jasmine Carter's story reminds us that systemic change begins with accountability and courageous leadership. Her ability to turn a moment of personal injustice into a movement for better policing is a testament to the power of integrity and resilience. But the fight against prejudice and systemic bias is far from over. Let this story inspire you to challenge injustice wherever you see it, whether in your workplace, community, or personal life. Share stories like Jasmine's to spark conversations and advocate for change. And remember, real progress comes when we hold ourselves and others to the highest standards of fairness and humanity. Together, we can create a world where respect, empathy, and equality are more than ideals. They're the foundation of our everyday actions. Join the movement for a better tomorrow by standing up for what's right, just as Jasmine did. Please subscribe to my channel, like and comment on the video. See you in the next one.